Anybody going home to the whole zoo? Anybody pretty much figure you got the whole zoo when you get home? Okay. And but one of the things that I think God calls us to do is to say, look, you got a choice. You can either step towards people or what? Step away. Life or death. You can either choose to add to their life and to treat them like they have high value, or you can choose to dam up the stream. Well, if you're going to choose to bless them and add life to them, then you want to get moving with appropriate touch, verbalizing them, attaching high value with your words, okay? And here's number 4 is picture a special future for them. Now, that's hugely important because kids tend to be literalists very often when it comes to what people say about their future, particularly somebody significant. Now, don't raise your hands, but I mean, I can't even tell you the things in counseling context and what you'll hear. You know, don't take algebra, that's for the smart kids. Don't even try out for that thing. You're never going to make that. You think somebody like you will, you know, just on and on. It's just ridiculous. But so many people subtract from others with their words. Okay? Jeremiah 29:11, the Lord says, hey, behold, I have for you a future and a hope. And the way that you nail that down is with genuine commitment. With genuine commitment. Now, let me give you a quick example of what I mean by kind of putting this all together. So here's my mom, single parent, because I think she started off probably as a golden retriever, but with 3 boys under 2. So there were, how do you get 3 under 2? You have to have a multiple, right? So I'm a twin. So I have an older brother and my twin brother. So here's my mom raising my older brother. Now Joe is a big, huge, all-state offensive left tackle, and great big, but he was a huge golden retriever, real sensitive until you got him mad. If you got him mad, then he was very fearsome. But then here's my twin brother that's the brilliant. Who has a really smart brother or sister? Anybody have a brother or sister? Oh, you're all the smart ones. Okay. Yeah. Well, Jeff graduated summa cum laude at Indiana University. Summa. Do you know what that is? That's above magna. Okay. I graduated, Lordy, how come? But Jeff was brilliant, and I called him the other day, asked him, like, hey, what are you working on? He goes, oh, you wouldn't understand. And he works at a thing called TGen, which is the Translational Genomics Institute. They do a bunch of high-end genetic cancer stuff. But senior year, let me pull it all together for you. Single parent home, my mom's the one that has chosen to step towards us and bless us. Okay? But Jeff turns in his term paper, the big one, the mother of all term papers. And what does he get in his term paper? Jeff. An A, that's all he ever gets. Gets an A. Okay, I turned mine in and I had worked hard. Now I hadn't started till the night before, but I had worked really hard, and I'm really old. And anybody remember typewriters? Anybody old enough to remember typewriters? You know how, like, or picture just like you ran out of ink in the printer. But back then, if you ran out of typewriter ribbon, you were toast. And so I ran out of typewriter ribbon. There were no 24-hour things back then, so I hand wrote the last 2 pages, and I didn't do footnotes because that looked hard. And but it was the best paper, I thought, on the Battle of the Bulge ever written by a high school student. And did you ever see the movie with the Red Ryder BB gun, Christmas Story? Remember, he turns in the theme to the teacher, and remember what he does? I turned in the theme to the teacher, and I think she's going to hand me back what? A plus. She goes up on the board and writes A plus, 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 and the kids carry him around the room, and then he wakes up. And then I woke up when she handed me back the paper, and I get a D minus on my big senior mother of all term papers, a D minus, and I had worked hard for me on this paper, and I'm looking at all this red, and I get to the very end, and here's my grade, the last page, and I still have the paper, and guess what she wrote on the bottom of it? She goes, the only reason why I gave you a D minus is because I don't want to see you next year. And I'm thinking, well, I don't want to see you either, you know? But as I'm going home, what am I thinking? Pathetic loser. You know, some of you that have really smart siblings, do you know what I'm talking about? Why is Jeff and why is your brother in all the classes or whatever? But I thank God that I had a mom that could care less if my older brother, guess what he did? Joe scored higher than Jeff and I in the ACT and the SAT. He scored the top 3% of intelligence in the United States. He never went to college. He drives heavy equipment. And then my twin brother, of course, you know, he's does what he does, but I'll never forget my mom comes home and from work, and she wants to see Jeff's paper, and then she wants to see mine. I think she wanted to see if I was going to graduate or not. And I go, well, the dog ate it. You know, what do you mean? Yeah, he didn't want to eat it, but he ate it. You know, and I go, he didn't. We had a bulldog. Come on, Sam didn't eat your paper. Bring me your paper. And I'll never forget. My mom makes me sit down, and she was a rheumatoid arthritic. Have you ever seen their hands? How bad they get? We called it the death grip. So watch what she did. She makes me sit down at the table. Bright eyes makes the heart glad. Remember, she brightens her eyes. So she reaches out and she would hold your hand if she really wanted to talk to you. Now, we hated it because when my mom held your hand, you couldn't pull away, because if you tried to pull away, it would twist her wrist and she'd cry because her wrist hurt so bad. It was rheumatoid. So we called it the death grip, you know. So you were just stuck for as long as she would hold your hand. Don't hold my hand, okay. You know, so she's holding my hand, looking at me, and she goes, well, tell me, why didn't you wake me up to get typewriter? And I go, well, you know, I mean, she hurt so bad at night, I wasn't going to wake her up. And I go, it don't matter. And she says, wait a minute. Now, I'll never forget, as long as I live, my mom looks at me. I'm a senior in high school, feeling totally worthless. And she says, you know what, you do such a good job of using words when you write. I wouldn't be surprised if God used you someday to help other people with your words. Now, I can tell you what my mom was wearing, where she was sitting at the table, the time of day it was. And what I'm trying to get at is what you heard from that guy about his dad, what I heard from my dad, you are going to have the opportunity to speak blessing into the lives of somebody. Now, it's not just a one-time deal, but I thank God that I had a mom. I mean, I would get the blessing from her too much, you know. But I'm really grateful for that. So here's what we're going to do. That's kind of the part, other than I'd love it if you went to theblessing.com and just chose to start off by writing a blessing to a family member, but then you know, choose one other person that if you don't give them the blessing, they're not going to get it. But here's what I'd like to do. We're just going to take 10 minutes to do this. That's kind of the presentation part of the blessing. So for 10 minutes, we're just going to do kind of Q&A, and then we'll end early. I know that'll really disappoint some of you that was hoping I would stay late. But we'll just, what you've heard a lot in a short period of time, but I can also go into, well, how does this really affect dating? How does this affect the workplace? How do you reverse the curse? You know, any questions on this whole blessing thing? And then the way we'll end up is I'm going to play you this John Waller song, who's a guy that this is like you're getting old when, you know, like you mentioned, you read the book when you were in graduate school. John Waller read the book The Blessing and wrote a song that we'll close up with. It's really cool at the end. But any questions on anything, reversing the curse, on these 5 elements of the blessing, on what happens if you miss the blessing, or anything, any questions on anything? Yes, sir.
I may have missed it, but how did you get involved in all of this?
Well, I think I just grew up in I was kicked out of grade school. I was just a pathetic slime loser. I was really becoming my dad. I was, on my way to being an alcoholic just like my dad. And this guy showed up in my senior year in high school that was a young life leader. And his name was Doug Barham. He was a big 6'4" ex-Chico State offensive tackle. And he would invite a bunch of us football guys to his home. And in his home, I saw the blessing. So guess what he would do, this big stud football guy. If you went to Doug Barham's house, you had to pray for the food. I'd never in my life held hands and prayed, appropriate touch, okay? We would pray for the food before you ate, and then we'd goof around with his boys. They were 6 and 5, and then he'd pick up them, and he'd walk them down the hall, and he'd set Andy down, who's the youngest, and he'd hold Mike. And he would right in the hallway, and so here's 6 or 7 of us football guys all in the hallway with these young boys. And we're all standing there, and he'd say, okay, time to put him to bed. And so he would pray a blessing over his son right there in the hallway. Might God do some great things in his life. and give them a great day, tomorrow and all that stuff. And then when he was done, he'd do what I did with our kids when they were little. And if you have a little brother or sister, you can do this, but don't do it if you have teenage brothers or sisters. But he would, with this 5-year-old, he would pray for him, and then he'd go, Shadrach, Meshach, and to bed we go. And from right, he would chuck him across the room, and they'd hit the bed, And I used to go over and mow his yard just so I could be around him. So it was a Christian family that lived out the blessing that really brought me to Christ. And then I started working in Young Life, and I'd see all these kids coming on. Are you familiar with Young Life? It's really a great evangelistic thing. But boy, I'd lead these kids to Christ, and they were in the same kind of home I came from. And so it was like, remember Ulysses' wife? She would weave all day and then unravel all night. So we'd build into these kids, and then, man, they just got... So I just decided I got to get more training, So that's really how I did it. I just kept doing training. Yeah?
I don't want to miss the contrast of this. Here's the D-minus on your high school paper, your big senior paper.
Yeah.
Right. How many books, how many articles, how many men have you spoken to through Promise Keepers, using your words?
Several.
How many have you blessed?
Oh, a few over the years, yeah. Some people have said I've written more books than I've read, which is not true. But no, I'm really old, so I've written 32 books for adults and 6 books for kids. But I helped start Promise Keepers 100 years ago, which was a men's deal. It was really fun and got to speak to a bunch of people. But the issue is what you guys are going to do with some of this. So any other questions on the blessing or reversing the curse? Or yes?
What would you do in the case of trying to give a blessing to someone who would not receive it?
Absolutely. Well, let me kind of, how are we doing on time? Gosh, we're right on time. Something's wrong. Okay. I besides writing books, I don't want to brag, but I'm a really good artist. And so let me draw something for you. Okay. So here's somebody, and let's say that they grow up in a home. All of us do, but they grow up in a home where there's a lot of challenges or a lot of hurts. Okay. Well, if you're a kid, you can't go with new parents. I mean, I tried running away, moving away. That doesn't help. They find you, bring you back. So you're pretty much stuck. But if you don't know how to deal with the pain, then what a lot of us do is we move into really, all of a sudden, particularly about junior high or so, we'll find something that works for us that is really self-protection oriented. Okay? So for my older brother Joe, he started lifting weights in junior high. And the more he lifted weights and the bigger he got. So for him, it was all, physical. He ended up just, he went from kind of a fat kid to growing up to springing up and lifting all these weights. With Jeff, guess what Jeff did was just, basically grades. He's usually been the smartest kid in the room, but that became really his whole life began to wrap around grades. And for me, I couldn't be the athlete my brother was. I couldn't be the, scholar that Jeff was, but I could goof around, and get in trouble. And so I was the rebel. So you can add all different kinds. But people, what they do is they begin looking at ways to really insulate themselves from this hurt that works. So I'm pretty, I'm the servant, I'm the one that organizes everything. We begin to define ourselves by something, and guess what Christ does is Jesus says, look, you know what, I don't care about all that stuff. I really care about you, and the way to reverse this isn't by trying to, really become somebody that goes after self-protection. It's really to seek me. And that's where life is. So when you start to try to bless somebody that doesn't want to do it, there's something blocking that blessing. Okay? Now it could be a burden from the past, okay, that they're carrying. You don't know about it, or maybe you do. Do you see what I mean? So a lot of people that have been in an abusive situation, if they haven't really dealt with that and they're carrying something, then man, let me tell you, you try to bless them, and it's kind of like your word just can just drop off. A lot of them, it's a behavior. Sometimes they don't want to be blessed because they don't feel worthy of it, because they're involved in behaviors that they don't want to quit doing, and you're making them, just by you telling them that you love them or care for them, and this happens in dating so much, it's just ridiculous, you know, is the distance closeness dance, you know. So let's say here's you, here's somebody you meet, and it could be the guy, this could be the gal, but they end up, you know, with the distance closeness dance. So what I mean by that is let's say this person, this is very stereotypic, didn't grow up with the blessing, never had any real closeness, didn't know what it looked like to, because I didn't know that. Well, this person, let's say, grew up with lots of closeness. Well, now they meet and they fall in love, but the problem is the closer this person gets, they want that closeness and relationship, but they're not comfortable with it. Now in courtship, that's fine, because courtship is the cessation of boundaries, basically, right? But once they get married, very often, what do they typically tend to do? Move back here to what they're comfortable with. So if you grew up without the blessing and you don't know what it is to really step towards, and all you know is people that have stepped away, then now you're stepping into their life and blessing them. And boy, let me tell you, it can be really uncomfortable. But that's why you never give up, and you look for creative ways to do it. In the scripture, for example, they use word pictures all the time. I don't have time to go into that, but you can get the book, The Blessing, if you want to go into detail. We go through using word pictures, because has anybody done play therapy? What do you share with kids that are resistant? I had a young lady I worked with just a little bit ago. She was 10 years old, abused by a trusted babysitter. Do you sit down with a 10-year-old and go, well, honey, tell me how you're feeling? No. So what you do, or what I did, was I laid out like 10 different pictures from magazines, actually about 15. And I said, hey, do me a favor, pick a picture that describes how you're feeling. She picks up a submarine. I mean, I had all kinds of pictures. She picks up a submarine. I go, you're kidding. How's that? She goes, well, I feel like ever since that happened, I feel like I'm down underwater and my periscope's up and I can see everybody else, but nobody can see me. Well, guess what we spent the next 4 sessions talking about was, what would it take to get the parachute? You see what I mean? You're using word pictures to, well, they used word pictures to bless people. Because if you're dealing with somebody that's insecure and you try to use their words, like Song of Solomon. What does Song of Solomon? He praises his wife 40 times in 8 chapters. But he always uses a picture. He says, to me, my darling, you're like my mare among the chariots of Pharaoh. So lean over to the lady nearest to you and say, boy, you sure look like a horse tonight. Does that make you feel better? Or your hair is like a flock of goats that is descended from Mount Gilead. Now, we don't get the picture, but what he was doing was using pictures that she understood. So, well, that is 10 minutes, and so I'm going to let you go with just this one song. Can I just show you the song? It's only a minute and a half. But John Waller